Franklin Graham's story began with helicopters landing in his front yard and crowds gathering outside his windows. Signs that he was born into a legacy unlike any other. He eventually stepped into that legacy, taking charge of worldwide ministries and becoming one of the most influential Christian voices of his generation. But influence comes with pressure, and pressure exposes cracks. Over time, Franklin's choices, partnerships, and public battles have changed how many people see him. Now, a storm he never saw coming is forming around his leadership, drawing attention from religious leaders, political critics, and people who watch how charities spend money. And as the world pays closer attention, one thing is becoming clear. This chapter of Franklin Graham's story may be his hardest yet. William Franklin Graham III entered the world on July 14, 1952, the fourth of 5 children born to Billy and Ruth Graham. Growing up as a Graham meant living in a home where faith wasn't just talked about, it was the air they breathed. His father was already a huge figure in spreading Christianity around the world, drawing massive crowds across continents, including in the United Kingdom. Choirs sang loudly, sermons moved people, and at the end of each one, Billy Graham would call people forward, challenging them to publicly declare their commitment to Christ. For young Franklin, that level of fame came with strange realities. Buses full of curious people would pull up outside their house, step onto the lawn, and press their faces against the windows, hoping to spot the famous evangelist. Privacy became a precious thing, and eventually the family moved to Montreat, North Carolina, into the mountains among tall trees and quiet space not far from grandparents who themselves had served as missionaries in China. Despite how well known the Graham name was, the children attended a small country public school and lived what looked like an ordinary childhood on the surface. His realization that his father lived a life unlike anyone else's came in one unforgettable moment. A helicopter landed right in the yard to carry Billy Graham to a crusade. It didn't happen often, but for Franklin, the roar of those blades was like a bright marker showing his father was different. Still, being surrounded by church, ministry, and missionaries didn't guarantee obedience. As Franklin moved into his teenage years, he fought against expectations and pushed against the faith he had grown up in. He later admitted that it wasn't lack of belief driving him. It was wanting to be independent. He wanted fun. He wanted control. He wanted life on his terms. That attitude led to consequences. He was kicked out of a private school in New York, then later from Laterno College in Texas after breaking curfew with a female student. Cigarettes became a habit. He wandered, looking for happiness everywhere except the faith of his own household. The more he lived for himself, the more he realized how empty that path was. In July of 1974, the global evangelical world gathered in Lausanne, Switzerland, for a major international gathering. More than 2,500 leaders from 150 nations came together for 10 days of planning, prayer, and vision. Franklin had just graduated from Montreat Anderson College and went to Switzerland to work behind the scenes handling logistics and operations. He turned 22 there. His parents took him to a quiet Italian restaurant on Lake Geneva to celebrate. After dinner, he and his father took a slow walk along the shoreline. Billy Graham, a man who avoided confrontation if he could, finally spoke with gentle determination. He told his son that he and Ruth sensed a battle going on in Franklin's heart. He pressed further. Franklin could no longer sit in the middle. He would have to choose: accept Christ fully or reject him openly. No pretending, no halfway life. But Billy didn't end with a warning. He told his son he loved him and always would, that home would always be open regardless of the path he chose. The words cut deeper than Franklin expected. He had worked hard to keep his rebellion hidden, to look faithful while living the opposite. Yet his father had seen through all of it. Those words stayed with him. And over the following weeks, they dug into places he couldn't ignore. One night, instead of going out drinking, he returned to his room early. He lit a cigarette, opened his New Testament, and turned again to John chapter 8. The line that held him was the same one that had been weighing on him since that walk on Lake Geneva. You must be born again. Nicodemus, a respected religious leader, had all the knowledge in the world, but it wasn't enough without surrender. Franklin read, and something broke loose inside. He knew he had been running from God. He knew he was tired. He knelt by his bed and prayed. Not polished words, but honest ones. He confessed, asked for forgiveness, and asked God to piece his life back together. That night, he surrendered. The running stopped after that turning point. Franklin began searching for God's direction for his own life and calling, not just his father's legacy. He returned to complete his business degree at Appalachian State University, needing only one final research internship. That internship placed him under two physicians who envisioned sending doctors to treat patients in developing regions. Franklin's research confirmed what they hoped. The need was enormous. Their idea became World Medical Mission, which would later operate under the growing organization known as Samaritan's Purse. Not long after, in his early 20s, Franklin joined Samaritan's Purse founder Bob Pierce on a demanding 6-week mission trip through Asia. Pierce, who originally founded World Vision, had grown discouraged, believing that the organization had drifted from its spiritual roots. While overseas together, Franklin felt a calling come alive inside him. A pull toward places scarred by war, famine, disease, and disaster. He later summarized it plainly. He believed he was called to the slums, to the ditches, to people in deep suffering. In 1978, he joined the board of Samaritan's Purse, and when Bob Pierce died the following year, Franklin was elected president. He was ordained in 1982 through Grace Community Church in Tempe, Arizona, and in 1989 held his first evangelistic crusade, later known as a festival. From that moment forward, he continued preaching the gospel worldwide, carrying forward the torch he once resisted. In 2000, he stepped in as CEO of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and by the next year, he was its president. But even with his purpose finally taking shape, Franklin soon found himself caught in a very different kind of battle. Franklin Graham has spent years under fire for his public stance on Islam. The criticism wasn't mild either. People saw his remarks as openly hostile toward Muslims, and the backlash followed. Him everywhere. The spark that lit the flame came in the wake of the September 11th attacks. In that tense moment, Graham delivered a quote that would follow him for decades, calling Islam a very wicked and evil religion. From that point forward, his name became tightly linked with the idea that Islam was, in his own framing, a religion of hatred and war. It marked the moment he stepped firmly into the world of far-right American politics and made no effort to step back. He repeated that belief again and again. In Time magazine and later on national television, he doubled down. Without hesitation, he reminded viewers that the attackers on 9/11s were Muslim, saying outright that it wasn't Methodists or Lutherans who flew those planes, but people of Islamic faith. In another interview, he argued that true Islam could not be practiced in America at all, pointing to examples of abuse and honor-based violence as if they defined the entire faith. Those remarks started catching up to him. In 2010, the Pentagon pulled back an invitation for Graham to speak at a National Day of Prayer event. Military advocates and Muslim organizations objected, and this time, their concerns held weight. The controversy didn't stop there. His public tension with Barack Obama only added fuel to the fire. In a CNN interview, Graham suggested the president had been born a Muslim, but acknowledged Obama later accepted Christianity. 2 years later, he walked into even murkier territory, saying that even though Obama was a fine man, he couldn't be sure whether the president's faith was real. Eventually, he issued an apology, saying he regretted any comments that questioned Obama's belief. By 2011, Graham's focus shifted again, this time toward the Muslim Brotherhood. He warned that the group had infiltrated every level of the U.S. government, a claim that echoed through political conversations and intensified the sense of division already brewing in the country. Too many scholars and religious observers. Franklin Graham represents a move backward, a return to a harsher, more exclusionary style of Christianity that leaves little room for those outside his faith. Critics argue that this approach stands in stark contrast to the direction his father, Billy Graham, intentionally pursued. Billy distanced himself from the strict fundamentalism of his youth, while Franklin leaned into it with renewed force. By the time 2016 rolled around, Franklin Graham had stepped fully into the role of Donald Trump's most vocal evangelical ally. Since 2012, records show that the Trump Foundation had funneled at least $100,000 into Graham's efforts. When Trump called for a complete stop to Muslim immigration, Graham backed him without hesitation. After Trump won the presidency, Graham went a step further. In an interview with the Washington Post, he credited the victory not just to voters, but to divine intervention. And even after Trump left office under the cloud of 2 impeachments and the violent Capitol attack, Graham stayed loyal. As Franklin Graham's influence grew, so did concerns about what that meant for the Graham name and for American evangelicalism itself. Critics argued that Franklin's political entanglements had weakened the evangelical voice in public life. The respect that Billy Graham earned around the world did not necessarily extend to his son. In October 2025, the evangelical world watched as Franklin Graham, head of 2 of the largest Christian ministries in America, pulled both organizations out of a major financial accountability group known as the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. The withdrawal came after new requirements aimed at protecting senior leaders from abuse and misconduct. Graham objected, arguing that personal spirituality and wellness routines are far outside financial purview. The decision marks the end of an era, especially since the group was co-founded by Billy Graham himself in 1979.